Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
You've spent 3 months preparing for this. The promotion, the raise, your entire career path, it all comes down to these 15 minutes. You open your mouth to deliver the final winning point, and the screen goes black. The router in the corner is blinking a slow, mocking red. You aren't just disconnected, you're invisible. What do you do when your digital life vanishes right when you need it most? Welcome back to Glisso. Here, we don't just study grammar from a textbook. We dive into the messy, high-stakes stories of real life to help you master English as it's actually spoken. Today, we're following a remote worker's desperate race against time in a world that's suddenly gone offline. As we go through this 10-chapter journey, you're going to learn how to describe high-pressure situations, technical failures, and the art of professional problem-solving. We'll be focusing on advanced idioms and the vocabulary of modern work-life balance. Stick around until the end of the story. Are you ready? Let's get into Chapter 1, The Glass Fortress. The morning light in Marcus's home office didn't just shine, it gleamed. Every cable was managed with surgical precision, hidden behind a mahogany desk that held a triple-monitor setup worth more than his first car. This was his sanctum, a glass fortress of high-speed fiber optics and noise-canceling acoustics. For a remote worker like Marcus, professional credibility wasn't built around a water cooler. It was constructed through a flawless digital presence. If his connection was crisp and his background was blurred to perfection, he was powerful. Today was the global strategy pitch, the culmination of 6 months of late-night data crunching and cross-continental coordination. Marcus adjusted his silk tie, a bit of psychological armor since the camera would only see his shoulders up, and took a deep breath. His pulse was steady. He had a backup battery, a secondary headset, and a glass of water positioned exactly 3 inches from his mousepad. At 8:59 a.m., the notifications began to chime like a digital herald. Ping, ping, ping. The titans of the industry were filing into the virtual lobby. Marcus clicked Join with a smirk of practiced confidence. 20 high-definition squares populated his screen, representing the board members who held his future in their hands. "Good morning, everyone," Marcus said, his voice resonant and clear through his studio-grade microphone. "I trust you can all see my opening slide." A chorus of nods and mm-hms came back. He was in the zone. The fortress was secure. He began to speak, unaware that outside, a distracted utility truck driver was backing into a primary junction box 3 blocks away. Marcus was 5 minutes into his presentation, and he was absolutely soaring. The complex data charts transitioned smoothly as he explained the projected growth for the 3rd quarter. His tone was authoritative yet conversational, the perfect balance for a room full of skeptical executives. "As you can see on the current map," he said, gesturing toward a brightly colored heat map of consumer trends. Suddenly, the video feed of the CEO, a woman usually known for her sharp and frequent nodding, froze mid-blink. Marcus paused for a fraction of a second, waiting for the slight lag to resolve itself. It didn't. One by one, the 20 high-definition squares turned into pixelated mosaics, their audio distorting into a robotic, digital screech. Then, a heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. In the center of his primary monitor, a small white circle began to spin, the dreaded icon of a buffering connection. "Can everyone still hear me?" Marcus asked, his voice betraying a hint of the ice-cold panic beginning to rise in his chest. He glanced down at the taskbar of his computer. The Internet icon had been replaced by a small gray globe with a no access symbol. A frantic look toward the bookshelf revealed the truth. His router, the heartbeat of his fortress, was no longer glowing a steady blue. It was flashing a rhythmic, taunting amber, signaling a total loss of signal. Marcus clicked his mouse repeatedly, a useless reflex of a man watching his career evaporate in real time. On the screen, the spinning circle continued its lazy, indifferent rotation against a backdrop of frozen faces. Marcus didn't waste a second. He lunged for his smartphone like a drowning man reaching for a life raft. "Hotspot," he whispered through gritted teeth, his fingers fumbling over the touchscreen with frantic energy. He enabled the cellular data sharing and watched his laptop's network list, praying for his phone's name to appear. There it was. The signal was weak, but it was there. He clicked connect, his eyes darting between the spinning icon on his computer and the signal bars on his phone. The connection status flickered to connected, and for one blissful heartbeat, Marcus thought he had outsmarted the outage. He refreshed the meeting window, leaning in so close to the screen that he could see the individual pixels. But the browser didn't load. Instead, a site can't be reached error mocked him in bold black letters. He looked at his phone and realized the horrifying truth. The 5G icon had vanished, replaced by a no service warning. The utility truck hadn't just severed a fiber optic line, it had damaged a localized cellular relay during the crash. The neighborhood was now a total digital dead zone. No Wi-Fi, no data, no lifeline. Marcus stood up so quickly he nearly knocked over his glass of water, the psychological armor of his silk tie now feeling like a noose. He looked out the window at the quiet, sunny street, realizing that everyone else was likely continuing their day in blissful ignorance. Inside the fortress, the silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of a computer that had nowhere to go. He had exactly 12 minutes left before the board gave up and moved on to the next speaker. Marcus didn't have time to mourn his dead signal. He had to move. He tore his laptop charger from the wall with a violent jerk and shoved the computer into his leather messenger bag. His eyes scanned the desk. Notebook, pens, car keys, everything went into the bag in a blurred flurry of motion. As he spun around, he caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. A man in a crisp navy blazer, a perfectly knotted tie, and plaid pajama bottoms. "No time," he hissed to the empty hallway, grabbing a pair of unlaced sneakers by the door. He burst out of the house into the mid-morning heat, the sudden transition from his air-conditioned sanctum to the humid air making him gasp. The quiet neighborhood now felt like a cage. He needed a signal, any signal, and he needed it 5 minutes ago. He threw the bag onto the passenger seat of his car and cranked the engine, the tires chirping as he reversed out of the driveway. His mind was a frantic GPS, calculating the nearest locations with public Wi-Fi, the library, the cafe, the hotel lobby downtown. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white, his eyes darting to the dashboard clock. 10 minutes remained. The analog sprint had begun, and for the first time in years, Marcus was at the mercy of physical traffic and red lights. He felt like a ghost trying to scream back into the world of the living, invisible and desperate. Marcus veered into the parking lot of the Daily Grind, a coffee shop usually packed with digital nomads and students. He didn't even wait to park properly, leaving his car at an awkward angle as he shouldered his bag and ran for the entrance. His heart hammered against his ribs as he pulled on the heavy glass door, but it didn't budge. He looked up and saw a handwritten sign taped to the inside. Closed due to local grid failure. No power, no Wi-Fi. A group of people stood on the sidewalk nearby, staring at their phones with the same hollow, confused expressions Marcus had worn 10 minutes ago. "It's everywhere," a woman said to him, her voice flat. "3 blocks in every direction. The signal is just gone." Marcus ignored her, his eyes scanning the street like a predator looking for a way out. He saw a hotel across the boulevard, a massive concrete structure that surely had its own independent backup systems. He sprinted across the 4 lanes of traffic, ignoring the honk of a passing delivery truck, his blazer flapping behind him. He burst into the lobby, the cold air conditioning hitting him like a physical wall, and he felt a momentary surge of hope. The lights were on, and the gold-trimmed clocks behind the reception desk were ticking away with indifferent precision. He flipped open his laptop right there on the marble floor, his fingers trembling as he searched for the hotel's network. A list appeared, Guest High-Speed Secure. He clicked it, his breath catching in his throat, only for a login screen to appear demanding a room number and a last name. Marcus looked at the front desk, where a line of 12 frustrated travelers stood waiting to check out of a system that was slowly crashing. Marcus stood in the center of the lobby, a frantic island of navy blue blazer in a sea of confused travelers. He looked at the long line at the front desk and realized he would never get a room number in time to save his career. "Marcus, is that you?" a gravelly voice called out from behind a towering stack of luggage. Marcus turned and saw Mr. Henderson, the retired librarian who lived 3 doors down from his house and spent his days tending to prize-winning roses. The older man was sitting in a velvet armchair, looking remarkably calm while clutching a thick hardcover biography. "Mr. Henderson, what are you doing here?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking with desperation. "Oh, the power is out at home, and I figured the hotel's library would be cooler for reading," the old man replied with a gentle smile. Marcus didn't have time for pleasantries. He dropped to his knees beside the armchair, his laptop still open on his lap. "Mr. Henderson, I am in the middle of the most important meeting of my life, and I am completely offline. Please, do you have a room here?" The librarian shook his head. "No, just visiting the lounge, but I do know the night manager, young Leo. He used to volunteer at the library." Mr. Henderson waved over a tall man in a sharp vest who was trying to navigate the crowded lobby with a look of extreme stress. "Leo, this is my neighbor," Henderson said, gesturing to Marcus. "He's in a bit of a digital pickle. Is that old office in the basement still wired up?" Leo looked at Marcus's pajama pants peeking out from under his blazer, then back at the respected Mr. Henderson, and sighed. "Follow me," Leo muttered, pulling a heavy ring of keys from his belt. "But stay out of sight. If my boss sees a guy in his pajamas in the server room, I'm finished." Marcus followed Leo through a heavy fire door and down a flight of concrete stairs that smelled of industrial cleaner and old paper. They moved past humming laundry machines and crates of extra towels until they reached a cramped, windowless office tucked behind the boiler room. "This is the old maintenance hub," Leo said, pointing to a single yellowed Ethernet cable snaking out from a wall panel. "It's a direct hard line to the hotel's backup server. It's slow, it's ugly, but it's constant." Marcus dropped his bag onto a metal folding chair and fumbled for his adapter, his hands shaking so much he nearly dropped the laptop. The room was sweltering. The massive boiler just feet away let out a rhythmic hissing groan that sounded like a mechanical beast. He plugged in the cable and held his breath as the no internet globe on his screen flickered, pulsed, and finally transformed into a solid connection icon. He didn't have time to worry about the lighting or the fact that a cobweb was dangling just inches from his forehead.
He clicked the rejoin meeting link, praying the board hadn't already moved on to the next item on the agenda. As the loading bar crawled across the screen, a large ginger cat, the hotel's resident mouser, jumped onto the desk and began to sniff his keyboard. "Not now, buddy," Marcus whispered, gently nudging the cat aside just as the video feed snapped into focus. He saw the CEO's face, looking impatient and ready to close the call, but his camera was finally live. He was back in the game, broadcasting from a hot, dusty basement miles away from his pristine fortress.
The screen flickered, and suddenly Marcus was staring at the CEO's stern face once again. He had been disconnected for exactly 11 minutes, an eternity in the world of high-stakes corporate finance. "If there are no further updates from the strategy team, we will move to the CEO was saying, her hand hovering over a physical folder. "Actually, Madam CEO, I'd like to pick up exactly where we left off," Marcus interrupted, his voice echoing slightly in the small concrete room. The heads in the 20 digital boxes snapped toward their cameras, a collective expression of shock crossing their faces. Marcus didn't look at the hissing boiler or the ginger cat now batting at his shoelaces. He stared directly into his webcam with unshakable focus. "I apologize for the brief technical interruption," he said, his tone as cool as if he were back in his climate-controlled office. "But as we discuss global resilience and emergency preparedness, I thought a real-time demonstration of adaptability was appropriate." A few of the executives chuckled, the tension in the virtual room breaking just enough for Marcus to regain his footing. He couldn't share his high-resolution slides anymore. The basement connection was too weak for heavy data, so he had to rely on his voice. He spoke with a newfound raw energy, describing the project's goals without the safety net of colorful charts or moving graphics. He was the only thing on their screens now, a man in a sharp blazer with a mysterious dark background, speaking with total conviction. As he spoke, he felt a bead of sweat roll down his neck, but he didn't flinch. He had fought too hard to get back into this room to let a little heat stop him. The moment Marcus had feared most, the failure of his polished slides, turned out to be his greatest advantage. Without the distraction of flickering animations or complex spreadsheets, the board members were forced to look at him. He leaned into the camera, the dim light of the basement office casting deep shadows that made him look more like a weary explorer than a data analyst. "The truth is," Marcus said, discarding his formal script entirely, "systems fail, and the unexpected is the only thing we can truly rely on." He spoke about the human element of the project, the people who would keep things running when the technology inevitably sputtered. For the first time in his career, he wasn't trying to be a perfect digital avatar. He was a person talking to other people. The CEO leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed, watching him with an intensity that made the basement feel even smaller. "Marcus," she interrupted, her voice softening slightly, "where exactly are you right now? That isn't your usual office." Marcus glanced at the ginger cat sitting on his lap and the rusted pipe leaking a single drop of water behind him. "I'm in a boiler room, ma'am," he replied, honestly, a small, tired smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I realized that if I couldn't find a way to finish this pitch, I wouldn't be the right person to lead this strategy." A silence followed, but it wasn't the cold, suffocating silence of the outage. It was the quiet of 20 people genuinely impressed. The Q&A session that followed wasn't a dry interrogation. It was a conversation about grit, resilience, and the reality of the modern world. The meeting ended not with a grand applause, but with a simple, thoughtful nod from the CEO before the screen faded to black. Marcus sat in the dim light of the basement for a long time, the only sound being the distant thrum of the hotel's laundry machines. He unplugged the Ethernet cable, tucked his laptop into his bag, and thanked Leo with a firm, grateful handshake on his way out. When he emerged from the hotel lobby, the world outside felt different, slower, quieter, and strangely more vivid. The internet was still down, and the streets were filled with people looking up from their palms, forced to notice the architecture and the trees. He drove home slowly, no longer checking the clock or worrying about the phantom vibration of notifications in his pocket. Back at his house, the glass fortress stood silent and dark, stripped of its digital power and its intimidating professional aura. He sat on his porch, still wearing his navy blazer and his plaid pajama bottoms, watching the sun dip below the horizon in a streak of orange. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the urge to take a photo of the sunset or share his success with a network of strangers. The outage had taken away his tools, his slides, and his high-speed connection, but it had given him back his voice and his confidence. He realized that his value wasn't stored in a cloud or measured by the resolution of a video feed. It was something he carried within himself. As the first stars began to appear, the lights in the neighboring houses flickered back to life, signaling the return of the digital world. Marcus stayed on the porch a little longer, enjoying the stillness of being truly, comfortably offline. Marcus started the day terrified of losing his signal, but he ended it realizing that his real power wasn't in his fiber optics, it was in his ability to adapt. Sometimes the circle of death is actually a doorway to a more authentic version of ourselves. But now the story is over and the real work for your English begins. Today, we saw Marcus think on his feet when his sanctum turned into a cage. We used the term "in a pickle" to describe his desperate situation in the hotel lobby. Did you notice how his psychological armor changed meaning throughout the chapters? These are the kinds of nuances that move you from intermediate to advanced fluency. Now, I want to know, have you ever had a digital nightmare during an important moment? Drop your story in the comments. I'll be hearting the best ones and correcting a few tricky sentences. Don't let your English progress stay offline. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next story. Stay connected in every sense of the word. Goodbye.